Now that we can connect to Snowflake securely, let's create a flow that runs automatically whenever data updates in Snowflake. We can use this template called Flow Project as a starting point. It's publicly available, you should check it out. It has a configuration file, Flow Project TOML, where you can specify the integration name and of course the fact that we are using Snowflake, as well as how often you want to check the updates in the database, every 30 minutes in this case. This example here is based on a repo called the Weather Flow Project. You can also find it under Outerbounds. Also check it out so you can follow along here. We are just using the integration that we defined before. And the name of the project is going to be Weather Project, checking everything every 30 minutes. The key thing is that we have this piece of SQL that checks the latest available timestamp in our table. It should update every hour. In this template, we have a sensor flow that basically takes care of triggering any downstream flows whenever the data updates. We can simply depend on that sensor flow to run our own flow, in this case, the weather viz flow. We get the latest timestamp, and then we can use the timestamp to basically run any query against the Snowflake database. Let's see how it works. Let's deploy both the sensor flow as well as then our test flow, weather viz flow here. We can then take a look how these flows look like in the Outerbounds UI. So here are the deployments. We can look at the dependencies between these flows here. So we have a sensor flow, runs every 30 minutes, and whenever that finishes, then we run the weather viz flow. Now let's trigger this sensor flow so we don't have to wait for 30 minutes to see what's happening. We can see now that it's running that we have a latest timestamp. We hadn't run this before, so that's the latest one that we have seen. So now it should trigger the downstream workflows. We can see that the weather viz flow is now starting. And we can take a look at the run. It is started by the sensor flow as expected. Here, let's take a look at the run that's executing. And we can see that, okay, it is querying the latest data in the database exactly as it should. We can actually take a look at the data itself by relying on Metaflow artifacts. So Metaflow records everything going on in the workflow, so it's super convenient to be able to see what's going on inside the flow. We can look at the task data. We are storing everything in this artifact called latest weather. So let's take a look at that here in the notebook. So let's take a look at the latest weather. You can always check the latest execution and see how data is changing. Indeed, we have the latest temperatures here. Now, the next interesting thing is that let's say that we want to keep changing this flow. We want to have a really nice GitOps workflow that allows us to create pull requests and even deploy multiple parallel workflows. So we can use this Outerbounds feature for GitHub action integrations. We can simply say that, okay, let's create an integration for the weather project here. And it spits out this beautiful GitHub Actions template. So even if you hadn't used it before, you can just put it there in the GitHub directory. Let's put the deploy YAML there. Especially it handles the authentication with the platform. We don't have to worry about it. And here we can deploy the flow. We have the deployment script included in the repo. Now let's create a new branch here, new viz. And let's add these files in our new branch. And let's enable some visualization to just demonstrate something interesting that could be happening on our pull request. And let's push this branch to upstream. And now if we go to GitHub, we should see that, okay, we have the new branch there. We can create a new pull request. And now, exactly as it should, when the pull request is opened, GitHub Actions starts executing. It does now deploy the workflows automatically here. But the key thing is that it creates a new branched deployment on the Outerbounds side. So it's not overriding the existing deployments that we did earlier, but it's creating a new branch that is fully isolated from the existing execution. We can see that soon. Okay, now the deployment is done. We can go and check out the deployments again, and we can see the branch, new viz. And we can see that we have a bunch of flows that are specific to this branch and with no executions, of course. So now let's again execute the sensor flow. We can see that this was deployed by the CI/CD. It's beautiful. And now we can also see that we actually have a multiple branches that we have deployed previously, all safely isolated from each other. So you can safely iterate on many different versions of the pipeline, which is really important for iterative workflows. Now we can see the result here. It was triggered by the sensor flow as before. And now we have a new version of our code that doesn't just output the data, but it outputs a beautiful visualization. So it is a map of the Bay Area with the latest temperatures. So now we have a workflow that updates every hour based on updating data in Snowflake and produces a visualization showing how the temperature kind of is going in the Bay Area.